What happens when love turns into an obsession? When a seemingly innocent relationship spirals into a dark and dangerous fixation? In today's true crime story, a young woman named Jasmine Kaur, full of promise and dreams, was tragically consumed by the very love that was supposed to protect her. Jasmine, a nursing student from India, moved to Australia with hopes of building a better future. But what she didn't know was that her journey would take a horrifying turn. Her ex-boyfriend, Tariq Jot Singh, couldn't accept the end of their relationship. What began as a passionate connection soon morphed into a dangerous obsession, ultimately leading to a life stolen too soon. How did a relationship go from love at first sight to an inescapable nightmare? Stay tuned as we unravel the chilling details of Jasmine's tragic fate and the obsessive love that led to her death. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment to keep supporting us. Welcome to Beneath the Surface, the dark side of crime. Chapter 1. A New Beginning in Australia. Expanded. Jasmine Kaur's decision to study abroad was not an easy one. She had always been close to her family, especially her mother, who had sacrificed everything to ensure Jasmine had a chance at a better future. After her father's passing when she was a teenager, Jasmine became the emotional anchor for her mother and her younger siblings. The decision to leave India and pursue her nursing degree in Australia was motivated by both ambition and a desire to give back to her family. Her mother, despite being proud of her daughter's accomplishments, was hesitant to let her go. They had never been apart for long, and the thought of Jasmine leaving the familiar surroundings of their small village to settle in a distant land filled her with anxiety. But Jasmine's passion for helping others and her unwavering determination won her mother over. With a heavy heart, her mother agreed to let her go, trusting that the life Jasmine would create in Australia would be worth the sacrifice. The bustling city of Adelaide, with its endless opportunities, was the perfect place for Jasmine to start fresh. She quickly immersed herself in her studies at the University of South Australia, where she was determined to make a name for herself. The city was not only known for its world-class educational system, but also for its beautiful landscapes, vibrant culture, and welcoming atmosphere. It wasn't long before Jasmine felt at home. But despite the promising start, Jasmine struggled with loneliness. She had always been close to her family, and the distance between them was something she constantly battled with. Though she forged friendships with her fellow students and her colleagues at Southern Cross Care, a part of her always felt like she was missing something. She yearned for the comfort of home, the familiarity of her mother's presence. It was during this vulnerable time that she met Tariq Jot Singh. Little did she know this man, whom she initially found comfort and connection with, would soon become the source of her greatest torment. Chapter 2. The Meeting of Tariq and Jasmine. Expanded. Jasmine first met Tariq in an introductory course at the University of South Australia. As international students, they bonded over their shared experiences of living in a foreign country, navigating cultural differences, and trying to adapt to a new environment. Tariq, who had come from a village near Samrala in India, seemed to understand Jasmine's struggles intimately. They began to study together, attending lectures and exchanging notes. Their connection was immediate, and Jasmine quickly grew fond of him. He was intelligent, articulate, and attentive, qualities that Jasmine valued deeply. Tariq would often walk her home after classes, offering to carry her books and help with her assignments. To Jasmine, it felt like the beginnings of something beautiful, someone who truly cared about her. In the early stages of their relationship, everything seemed perfect. Tariq was always there when she needed him, and Jasmine felt a sense of comfort in his presence. He was a source of emotional support when the pressures of studying abroad began to feel overwhelming. But beneath this facade of kindness, something more unsettling was taking root. Over time, Jasmine began to notice small things that didn't sit right with her. Tariq started calling her more frequently, checking in on her, and asking about her whereabouts. At first, it was endearing. He seemed protective, even caring. But as the days passed, the calls became more frequent, and the questions became more invasive. Tariq seemed to want to control everything in her life. If Jasmine made plans with friends, he would demand to know who would be there and what time she would return. He would often show up uninvited, his jealousy palpable whenever another man was involved in her social circles. Jasmine initially brushed it off, convincing herself that Tariq was simply worried about her well-being. But deep down, she knew this behavior was becoming problematic. Despite these growing concerns, Jasmine was reluctant to confront them. Tariq had swept her off her feet with his charm and attentiveness, and she didn't want to believe that the man she had fallen for could be controlling. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. As Tariq's behavior continued to escalate, Jasmine found herself caught between her desire to maintain the relationship and her need for independence. Chapter 3. The warning signs expanded. The first major red flag came during a weekend outing with some friends. Jasmine had made plans to visit a local cafe with a few classmates, but when Tariq found out, he insisted on joining them. She agreed, not wanting to cause tension, but his presence at the gathering was overwhelming. He kept a tight grip on her, both literally and figuratively. Every time someone spoke to her, Tariq's eyes would narrow, his posture stiffening, as though marking his territory. As the evening wore on, Jasmine began to feel uncomfortable. Tariq started asking pointed questions about the other people in the group, his tone subtly accusatory. Jasmine could see the signs of jealousy in his eyes, but she didn't know how to address it. When they left the cafe, Tariq didn't let her go home alone. He insisted on walking her back to her apartment, his mood dark and sullen. The next day, Tariq confronted her about the evening. He accused her of ignoring him in favor of her friends. He demanded to know why she hadn't told him about the outing beforehand. Jasmine tried to reassure him, but the argument that followed left her shaken. It wasn't the first time he had tried to control her social life, and it wouldn't be the last. This was the moment Jasmine realized that her relationship with Tariq was no longer healthy. Tariq's need to be with her every second, to monitor her every move, was suffocating. But despite her concerns, Jasmine found herself trapped. Every time she tried to distance herself, Tariq became more clingy, more desperate to keep her under his control. The emotional manipulation was subtle, but effective. She began to feel like she was walking on eggshells, afraid that even the smallest disagreement could set him off. But breaking up with him seemed impossible. Tariq's threats of self-harm and his emotional outbursts made Jasmine fear for his well-being and for hers. Chapter 4. The Turning Point expanded. By January 2021, Jasmine had reached her breaking point. She could no longer tolerate Tariq's controlling behavior, and the weight of the relationship was becoming unbearable. She began to feel like a shadow of her former self, once a vibrant, independent young woman, now reduced to someone who lived in fear of her boyfriend's wrath. The tipping point came when Tariq showed up at her workplace unannounced, claiming that he was worried about her. Jasmine was shocked and upset by his lack of boundaries. She had made it clear that she needed space, but Tariq's disregard for her feelings left her feeling cornered. That evening, she sat down with him, determined to end the relationship once and for all. Tariq's reaction was not what she expected. Instead of accepting the breakup, he lashed out. He begged her to reconsider, accusing her of being ungrateful, of abandoning him. When she insisted that it was over, he became desperate, threatening to harm himself if she didn't take him back. Jasmine, in a state of panic, promised to think it over, hoping he would calm down. But the truth was, there was nothing left for her to reconsider. She knew in her heart that she could not continue in a relationship where she felt controlled and afraid. The decision to break up with him had been long overdue, and Jasmine knew that the only way to regain control of her life was to take that step, no matter the consequences. Chapter 5. The Police Warning Expanded. When Jasmine's attempts to break up with Tariq failed, his behavior escalated. He started sending her a barrage of text messages, each one more threatening than the last. Tariq's obsession had grown to a point where he began to stalk her. He would follow her after work, stand outside her apartment, and continuously bombard her with messages, demanding that she return to him. Terrified for her safety, Jasmine took the only step she could think of. She went to the police. In February 2021, Tariq was formally cautioned for stalking. The authorities advised him to stop all contact with Jasmine, warning him that any further harassment would lead to legal consequences. For a brief moment, Jasmine felt a sense of relief. Surely this would be the end of it. Tariq would leave her alone, and she could begin rebuilding her life. But the police warning did little to stem Tariq's obsession. The stalking only continued, and Jasmine's fear grew. His messages became more sinister, often threatening to harm himself if she didn't take him back. Tariq had become fixated on the idea that if he couldn't have her, no one could. Chapter 6. The Disappearance Expanded. March the 6th, 2021, began as an ordinary day for Jasmine Kaur. She was expected at her usual shift at Southern Cross Care, where she worked as a nurse in an aged care facility. Her colleagues, who had grown fond of her over the months, knew her to be reliable and punctual. But when Jasmine didn't show up for work, they immediately grew concerned. It wasn't like her to miss a shift without notifying anyone, especially considering how committed she was to her patients. Her colleagues tried calling her, but their calls went unanswered. Her phone was off, and there was no response to their texts. This sudden silence from Jasmine raised alarms. They decided to contact her family, hoping they had heard from her. But when her aunt and uncle, with whom she had been living, also couldn't locate her, they called the police. By this point, the anxiety in the air was palpable. Jasmine's family, knowing how dedicated she was to her life in Australia, was certain that something had gone wrong. There was no reason why Jasmine would simply disappear without a trace. Within hours, the authorities began their search. However, the investigation initially drew a blank. No signs of forced entry into her home, no suspicious activity around her workplace, and no leads on her whereabouts. The police were left with no clues, no explanations, only a rising sense of dread. It wasn't long before they turned their focus to Tariq Jot Singh, Jasmine's ex-boyfriend. Tariq was a familiar figure in the investigation, given his past behavior. When questioned, he denied knowing anything about Jasmine's disappearance. He claimed he hadn't seen her for days and had no idea where she might be. However, as police continued their questioning, his alibi began to falter. The inconsistencies in his story raised red flags. Chapter 7. The Confession. Expanded. As the investigation deepened, Tariq's story began to unravel. Despite initially denying any involvement, his behavior became more erratic under scrutiny. The authorities questioned him again, and this time his defenses started to break. Tariq eventually admitted to seeing Jasmine the night she disappeared, but the details of his account were disturbing and inconsistent. He initially claimed that Jasmine had taken her own life, and in a state of panic, he buried her body in the Flinders Ranges, a remote area north of Adelaide. He said he was trying to protect her by hiding what had happened. But when the police took him to the site of the burial, they found something that contradicted his story. Jasmine's body was discovered in a shallow grave. What they found was far more chilling than anything Tariq had confessed. Her hands were bound behind her back with zip ties, and her feet were also tied together. Jasmine had been blindfolded and gagged, a clear sign that she had been restrained and powerless before her death. The details of the scene painted a different picture than Tariq's initial claims. To make matters worse, police uncovered CCTV footage showing Tariq purchasing several items from a local hardware store, items that would be used in the abduction: a jerry can, duct tape, gloves, and cable ties. His calm demeanor while shopping and the ease with which he interacted with the store employees were in stark contrast to the gravity of what he had planned. This footage was a clear indication that Tariq had been preparing for this crime for days. Chapter 8. The Evidence Mounts. Expanded. The evidence against Tariq became undeniable. Surveillance footage revealed not only his purchase of items needed to abduct and restrain Jasmine, but also his movements leading up to her disappearance. It showed him filling up his car at a gas station and traveling north, further confirming the timeline of events. The police had also seized his phone, which provided a wealth of damning information. Hundreds of text messages were discovered between Tariq and Jasmine, many of them filled with threats, emotional manipulation, and demands for her to come back to him. These messages spanned the course of their entire relationship and, more chillingly, the weeks leading up to Jasmine's disappearance. Tariq had stalked her relentlessly, tracking her movements, sending multiple messages a day, threatening violence and suicide if she didn't return to him. The most disturbing find on his phone were 2 unsent messages written to Jasmine in the days before her disappearance. The first read, "Deep inside what I feel but can't get over." The second, more ominous, stated, "You're bad luck that I'm still alive. Watch, you will get the answer. Every one of you will get the answer." These messages were not the words of someone trying to end a relationship peacefully. They were the words of a man who felt entitled to Jasmine's love, to the point of threatening harm if he couldn't have her. The overwhelming evidence forced Tariq to change his story once again. His earlier claims about Jasmine's supposed suicide were now impossible to believe. The prosecution now had everything they needed to charge him with kidnapping and murder. Chapter 9. The Trial Expanded. Tariq Jot Singh's trial was a public spectacle, one that shocked the Australian public to its core. The case made headlines across the country, drawing attention not just for the brutality of the crime, but also for the chilling premeditation involved. The prosecution's argument was straightforward. Tariq had planned Jasmine's abduction and murder well in advance. They laid out a timeline showing how Tariq had carefully purchased the supplies, created a false alibi, and executed his plan with disturbing efficiency. Every detail of the crime, from the restraint of Jasmine to the way her body had been disposed of, indicated that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a carefully orchestrated act of vengeance. Jasmine's family was in the courtroom every day, their grief palpable. Her mother, devastated by the loss of her daughter, took the stand and described the anguish of knowing that her child had been taken from her so violently. Her words resonated deeply, as they were spoken not just as a mother, but as someone who had lost her reason for hope. Jasmine's friends and colleagues also testified, painting a picture of a vibrant, hard-working woman who had so much to live for, only to be cut down by a man who refused to let her go. In his defense, Tariq's legal team argued that his actions were the result of an emotional breakdown, that he had been unable to cope with the breakup. They tried to paint the crime as a crime of passion, claiming that his mind had been clouded by grief. But the prosecution rejected this claim, emphasizing that there was no heat of the moment here, only calculated cruelty. In the end, Tariq changed his plea to guilty just weeks before the trial began. He admitted to kidnapping and murdering Jasmine Kaur, and on July 5, 2021, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 23 years. The judge's words were damning. Your actions were premeditated and cold. You showed no remorse for the life you took. Jasmine Kaur was a woman with dreams, a future, and love to give. You stole that from her and left her family in a world of grief. Chapter 10. The Aftermath and Reflection Expanded. In the aftermath of the trial, Jasmine's family was left to cope with a deep wound of her loss. They remembered Jasmine not just as a victim, but as a bright light in their lives. She had come to Australia with a purpose: to help others, to make her family proud. Her passion for nursing, her deep care for those in need, and her vibrant personality were things her family would cherish forever. Jasmine's mother, who had always dreamed of seeing her daughter grow into a successful and compassionate woman, now found herself overwhelmed with regret. She wondered if her decision to send Jasmine abroad had been the right one. Her voice cracked as she spoke about how much she missed her daughter, how much she wished she could have protected her from the man who had claimed to love her. Though Tariq had been sentenced to life, Jasmine's family knew that no amount of time in prison could ever bring her back. The void left by her death could never be filled. They visited the Flinders Ranges, where Jasmine's life had been taken, as a way of confronting the place where their daughter's dreams were shattered. They laid flowers at the site, hoping to find some semblance of peace. Jasmine's legacy, however, lived on. Her family began a foundation in her name, dedicated to raising awareness about the dangers of controlling and abusive relationships. Jasmine's story, while tragic, became a catalyst for change, a reminder of the importance of recognizing the signs of emotional abuse and the consequences of allowing such behavior to continue unchecked. Jasmine Kaur's life was stolen by a man who couldn't accept rejection. Tariq Jot Singh's obsessive behavior turned a simple breakup into a nightmare, one that ended in violence. Jasmine's story is not just a cautionary tale about toxic relationships. It's a tragic reminder of the devastating impact one person's actions can have on an entire family. Her dreams were cut short by a man who thought that if he couldn't have her, no one would. But despite his actions, Jasmine's memory lives on through those who loved her. Her family's resilience in the face of such loss is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Thank you for joining us today for this emotional and tragic story. If you found this case as disturbing as I did, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, it's important to recognize the signs of emotional abuse before it escalates. Stay safe, and as always, look out for each other. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories.